The Suez Crisis of 1956 was triggered by the nationalisation of the Suez Canal by Egypt's president, Nasser, which angered the UK and France as they relied heavily on the canal for their oil supplies, and let's face it, it was also a symbol of their colonial prestige. Ironically, both the UK and France had themselves recently nationalised a whole slew of their own industries, so the hypocrisy of their response to Egypt doing the same wasn't lost on the international community. Now, the story goes that the construction of the Suez Canal was initially financed by a French consortium with support from the Egyptian government. Construction began in 1859 and was completed 10 years later. The canal was technically owned by the Suez Canal Company, with shareholders being both the Egyptian government and private French investors. But in 1875, as a result of ballooning debt and a domestic financial crisis, Egypt was forced to sell its shares in the canal, which were purchased by the British government under Benjamin Disraeli. The UK were enthusiastic buyers and obtained a 44% share, with French investors still making up the controlling proportion. The Egyptians continued to be plagued by ongoing economic mismanagement and a cultural backlash as a result of its program of modernisation, which saw European investment in the country come under significant threat. So the UK increasingly took measures to protect their assets and pressured for the current ruler, Khedive, or Viceroy, Ismail I, to be replaced with a more, shall we say, malleable ruler in his stead. With their support, his son, Tewfik I, was installed as ruler of Egypt and Sudan, but this progressive and liberal-minded ruler had inherited a country on the verge of a nationalist rebellion, which duly happened in 1882, when he was deposed by one of his own army colonels called Urabi Pasha. The British and French offered their support to the Khedive in what has come to be known as the Anglo-Egyptian War of 1882, or more precisely, the British conquest of Egypt. The rebels had managed to gather a total force of over 60,000 troops, but many of them were poorly trained and armed, such that the British, after attempting an aborted landing at Alexandria, bombarded the city instead and redeployed their 40,000-strong expeditionary force to the Suez and attacked from the west instead. Within 2 months, they had successfully liberated Cairo, captured the rebel leader, and reinstalled the Khedive, imposing substantial British control over Egyptian affairs and profits for themselves for decades to come, all at the expense of not only the Egyptians but the French and Ottomans as well,